You're listening to the Business Communicators, presented by IABC Houston. And now your hosts, Austin Stenton, Hattie Horn, and Thomas Bain.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 28 of the Business Communicators, the podcast presented by IABC Houston. My name's Austin Stenton, joined alongside my co-host Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain on this journey as we explore the key issues and trends that impact us as communications professionals. And guys, it's the end of Season 3. This is the season finale of the Business Communicators podcast. But don't worry, we're coming back for a Season 4. It's going to be even bigger, even better than before. And we've got a great guest that is going to join us here in a few moments. Is Diane Schwartz, the CEO of Ragan Communications, is going to join us as we close out this season. But Thomas, good to see you back on the podcast. You've been kind of here or there during that whole moving process, and I will say that Hattie and I missed you when we had lunch last week, and we missed you when you left us on the episode 26 of the podcast. We made a little joke at the end of episode 26, and did you hear it?
I did. And, you know, it's good to be back. It's good to be there. Family vacation took place. And as we record this episode on the newest federal holiday, I was actually in Galveston, and I actually walked right past it, and I took a moment of pause at 12th and Seawall. So, you know, it's glad to be back. I'm happy that we're here. Looking forward to doing it in person more often than not. And as Austin said, we'll be back for Season 4. But if you have any breaking news since we cover it, please email one of us, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. And maybe one of these days we'll publish our behind-the-scenes text message chains.
I don't know if we'll do that. I don't think we'll do that. That is not a guarantee. Unless you want to pay $100 a month on like Patreon or something. Maybe we'll allow you into the group chat. But Hattie, it's been a lot of fun, Season 3. And, you know, we were able to record in person last week, at least for the intro and outro session. And I thought that was a lot of fun. But how's everything going for you as we wrap up Season 3? And
actually, I'm kind of looking forward to a break, but I thought last week was really great, us recording in person. It was good to see you. We did a late celebration of your birthday, and since Thomas ghosted us, we talked about him. That was probably one of my favorite parts.
At least an hour talking about Thomas.
Woo! Some of the things we say.
Thomas, if you want to hear that conversation, you can go to Patreon and subscribe.
Subscribe to the podcast I'm already on.
I know, we give you
subscribe to the Thomas Bain roast.
Yeah, we give you a hard time. We do love you, Thomas, most days, but you know.
I don't know who is more red right now, Thomas's face or my shirt, but I can't. I don't know if that's the embarrassment or the sunshine that he got from Florida.
That's what he gets for ghosting us, vacation or not.
Thomas, we love you. We love you.
I'm saying this with my fingers crossed.
Thomas, this is why you don't leave us. This is why you don't leave us. You will have perfect attendance next year.
It's like missing a meeting at work is when it's like, okay, all these tasks can be delegated. Who's missing this meeting? Oh, right, they're in charge of all of it now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we definitely miss you, Thomas and Hattie. It's great. It's been great working with all three of you this season on the Business Communicators, and I'm really happy to see the growth and the development of the podcast from Season 2 to Season 3, and I can't wait to see what Season 4 brings. And hopefully, we get to do those episodes in person. And I think Season 4 is probably going to look a little bit different, but we'll have more information coming in the upcoming months. But we're not going anywhere during that time. We're still going to be recording episodes. We're still going to be having conversations, posting on social media. We'll probably do like a LinkedIn Live, an Instagram Live, a Clubhouse chat, or something like that throughout the time to stay connected with our audience. So if you want to stay connected with us, we recommend that you follow us on social media. Just search @BizCommunicator on all of the platforms, or, you know, even if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn. Hattie's active, Thomas is somewhat active on LinkedIn, I'm active on LinkedIn. So find us there as well. And of course, you can go to thebusinesscommunicators.com to find out more about our podcast. And of course, this show would not be possible without our sponsors. So I want to thank Pierpont Communications, Mike Krantz & Co., and IABC Houston for supporting this podcast in Season 3. But let's go ahead and get to our conversation with Diane Schwartz. It's a conversation that I think and hope that our listeners will enjoy. And again, she has done everything from journalism to leading Ragan Communications now, but Let's get to Diane. So it's time to sit back, relax, and be informed.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Joining us on the Business Communicators is Diane Schwartz, CEO of Ragan Communications, a leader in training for professionals in corporate comms, public relations, social media, and management worldwide for more than 5 decades. And the Ragan Report and Ragan's PR Daily are just two of the popular resources used by comms pros to, really get the conversation going and develop strategy within their organizations. And Diane, I can't tell you how many times Hattie, Thomas, and I share, articles that come from Ragan in our group thread. So it's great to have you on the podcast this week.
Thanks for having me, and that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I think back to, my first Ragan conference. It was actually in Denver, Colorado, back in, I believe, 2014, 2015. And it was crazy weather in Denver, so I'll never forget that. But things have changed a lot, in the past year, obviously, with COVID-19 and how we do in-person conferences, specifically with your role. Like, how has your role changed over the past year, with COVID, and can you kind of maybe give us a little more deeper look into your role and responsibility at Ragan?
I've only been at Ragan 2 years as, leading the company, and halfway through, a year into my tenure, the pandemic hit. And as we know, it wasn't just COVID that we have all been dealing with for the past 15 months. There have been a lot of other crises in our country in particular. And so it has been quite the roller coaster ride, but not without its silver linings for me in terms of leading a company that serves communicators has been just an amazing experience because, as you know, and those listening in, the communicator's role was essential and remains essential, but was really essential in the last 15 months during these multiple crises that we faced. So our community really came together through all of our different networks that we have for them and really helped each other out. We feel like we played a role. My team feels a sense of purpose for the last year or so, an increased sense of purpose, if you will, in terms of helping communicators navigate all these new pathways for their organization. So for me, that has been really gratifying as a leader of the company and as someone who serves communicators. So my job, the actual job of running, Ragan, didn't, the same principles applied, but things were it's been a constant moving target for us. And we've been really nimble, been listening to our community, and, we're a content company. So we're able every day to provide new things for them.
Specifically around April and May of 2020, it seems that, at least in the IBC circles, it seems that the conversation was around communicators finally having a seat at the table. And, whether that was at the leadership position or the C-suite position, but at least in conversations that I've had over the last few months with people throughout the world, it seems that maybe there's concern that was short-term and that it's not long-term, and that maybe comms pros, marketing professionals don't, maybe they're at the kids' table. They're not at that, that executive leadership role. Why is it that you think, maybe corporations don't necessarily put the value in having a communicator at the C-suite level and providing such input that is really helping driving, some of that corporate narrative?
It is a great question, and one that we try to address every week in what we do at Ragan. I don't know, I still don't think most communicators do have a seat at the table. And even those that do, I think most will say they may have a seat, but their voice is not as strong or loud as others in the room. Where is that seat? Maybe it is the kids' table, metaphorically speaking. Which I don't know if I'd rather maybe not be at the kids' table, right? Like wait until I can be at the adult table. Right. But I think, part of it, so we just like your members, and there's internal comms folks that are part of our community, and there are internal comms, and then there's the PR pros, and then whether they advocate for themselves or not, is one thing. Who they report into, it's the common mantra is, I'm sick of being an order taker. Communicators have been in a position almost by default of just taking orders from other departments, and frankly, they're tired of it. And I think you're seeing more communicators getting put in the front of chief communications officers. I think you see more of them having sort of the courage of their conviction to ask for a seat, to ask to be invited into the room, right, and to stand up and have a voice. And so maybe we need to change the narrative here and just really talk about getting invited to the room, not necessarily like sitting back and like listening to the conversation, but standing up and saying something important, and something that maybe is not necessarily PR speak or communication speak, but is more speaking the business language and the language of their company.
That's an interesting point that you make, which brings me to the question for you as a follow-up. Do you believe that communicators have not done as good of a job helping their leaders understand the value of what they do and why they do it?
I wouldn't say they haven't done a good job. I think that communicators have been working really hard on the measurement side of the discipline and finding ways to prove the value of their efforts. Not a direct line, to revenue oftentimes. So the conversations are harder with senior management, right? So really understanding the metrics. We don't really have standards in this industry, around communications, or it's really all over the place. And there are organizations that endeavor to, have those standards and to communicate them out. But I think it's different in every organization. So I think there's more to be done for sure on that front. There's improvements to be made. And, the more that there are metrics for which, in which they can, use and stand on, to prove their worth, to get more budget, right? And then to get a bigger piece of the budget every year, to have more tools at their disposal, right? More people in their department. And we're seeing that happening now. That's the good news. It's starting to happen. And the last year has accelerated those efforts for sure.
Looking back at your profile, I see that you were a journalist and a communicator prior to becoming a CEO. Is there any specific examples or lessons you can learn, tips that you should give us as communicators on, things to watch out for, things that you should stand up and do?
I love having a journalism degree, because one of the best takeaways from being a reporter and learning through the journalism route is knowing how to ask questions, knowing what questions to ask, also knowing when to shut up and listen to, when you're interviewing someone, and in the business case, when you're just having a meeting or talking to someone, asking the right questions, being curious, knowing when to listen. And so I would say that really applies to anyone in an organization, right? They need to know what questions to ask, when to ask them, and when to listen. So that's the piece of advice I hope, can take away from this talk. What do you think?
I mean, I'll jump in. I think Hattie and I had a boss one time. Her name was Liz. She came from the Associated Press. She was the chief White House correspondent during, I think, the Obama years, and she always told us to think like a reporter for our communications team. And I thought that was so incredible. Now, I never took a journalism class, but I did some writing, covering high school sports, college sports, and being able to develop those relationships with sources, with athletes, coaches, that was so critical to getting, the right story in place. And I think that's the same thing with communicators. And Hattie, you could probably speak to this a little bit more than I, but from an internal comms perspective, if you want to get the most compelling stories to tell your corporate narrative, you've got to develop those relationships. You've got to develop those sources internally, right? I mean, there are certain company talking points that you can always hit, but if you want to dig deeper and humanize the story, it comes from the relationships.
And I actually have a journalism minor. So I believe in that perspective is that it's also about asking the right questions as you're developing those relationships. And it's about making that person feel comfortable communicating and talking to you and telling you everything you need to know. And they're going to do that when they're comfortable. So that's something that I've always believed in as a communicator, is just asking the right question, asking a lot of questions, and being genuinely curious about the individual that you're asking those questions for. And that makes them feel better about responding to what you say. But I want to switch gears here for a second. Was noticing in this week's or the other day's Daily Ragan that you had an article about Juneteenth and how companies should be talking to their employees about Juneteenth, which I find very interesting in terms of what is the actual segue in talking about the holiday itself, in terms of, I mean, your perspective in the holiday itself and making people feel more inclusive about it. Because I saw that you weren't the only guys who talked about that in terms of Juneteenth. Everybody's talking about it. I've experienced it most of my life living here in Texas, in Houston, and I always knew what Juneteenth was about. So I just find it very, I'm curious to know, how is Juneteenth going to help, work its way into that conversation of making people feel more included? What was that angle there?
Yeah, we've been covering that for the past couple of weeks, how brands plan to communicate with their team, organizations plan to communicate with their teams, and how brands are also using that as an opportunity to, build more trust with their stakeholders. And it's, it's not an isolated thing, Juneteenth, right? This is an ongoing, social justice and awareness and inclusivity is ongoing. It's not just about Juneteenth, right? This gives us another opportunity to bring in diverse voices into, into the room, into the conversations, for there to be more of a safe space for people to talk. This is a springboard for discussion. But it's certainly not the beginning and not the end of it, right? And I think it's amazing. I was amazed that that federal employees already have today, this is Friday, already have today off. Talk about, we sometimes criticize the government for acting really slowly with things, but wow. And I think that is getting more noticed because of that. People are really saying, what is this? And, let me take some time to learn. And within organizations that have DEI committees and, employee resource groups, it's another great opportunity to talk about this, to learn more. And I've certainly learned a lot in the last 48 hours, as there's been so much news coverage, and just people have to self-educate too. And, I wonder what you think about that, because we've been hearing, a lot from our, community that Black employees are tired of always being asked to explain, what do I do about this? Or what is that holiday? Or what happened here? We others, have to take time to learn on their own, and to be proactive, on this front. We just can't rely on our, colleagues of color to show us and tell us what to do, right?
Yeah, I can appreciate your perspective on that, but I guess I'm not sure how a day off helps people feel included or feel like equitable and they're being treated fairly.
Yeah, that's why I say it's not just this one day thing and then we move on, right? It's a continuum.
It's the same thing with like having months, like Black History Month, Pride Month, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, like companies that maybe change their logo for 1 month. That's just checking a box. It's not actually creating that inclusive environment, right? You have to be about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that's through creating, employee resource groups, business resource groups, and having leadership actually take action and show that they are taking action, not just talking about it. So I think that's something that's incredibly important. But I want to go back really quickly to journalism, because you mentioned about thinking like, we talked about thinking like a reporter and how important it was for you to have that journalism background. And over the last really 18 months, we've seen Substack and other platforms similar to Substack that have really, really just blown up. And we've seen Substack offer like New York Times reporters 6-figure salaries to leave the Times and come over and post exclusively on their page. But we have some other journalists out there, like Yashar Ali is another journalist that has been using Substack. And while he has a lot of credibility on Twitter and has broken some key stories, and he's a huge, Twitter fan favorite of Thomas and I's, some of his work on Substack has been questioned in terms of using anonymous sources and maybe getting the meat of the story right, but not necessarily all of the details correct. So my question for you is, are platforms like Substack dangerous when it comes to journalist practices and ethics and guidelines, or is it platforms like Substack, are they really, I guess, true journalists, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, Substack and the subscription model and independent publishers, if you will, this is all, an offshoot of just really what's happened in the media, for the past decade, really, or even more than a decade. And I was going to, add to the conversation before about the commonalities between PR, media, in terms of storytelling. Ultimately, that's where, that's a common thread, and also the symbiotic relationship. And so the media needs PR more than ever, to help them tell stories in terms of getting media coverage. I mean, providing data and infographics and video and visuals. I mean, there's never a better time to be helpful to the media, and the media actually answering the call, As far as anonymous sources, I mean, is it really that different? I mean, it's a new platform, but it's the same, it's still an issue. No matter what, whether if Substack went away, that would still be an issue. I think educated readers think twice about, stories that have anonymous sources, or, that, that disinformation and misinformation is a huge issue right now in our society. And the more, it does worry me, the amount of content sites that crop up that don't have editors, no one's editing them, but anyone now can publish anything, right? So, my advice is to work with reliable sources, reliable media sources. I'd be very careful about, where you put your senior leadership, quote, where you offer, interviews and so forth. Definitely verify and then trust.
I'm a PR person originally, and I had to take some journalism classes, and I loved your comment about ask the right questions and then learn to be quiet. I was lucky that in the PR world, I had a lot of people who talk all the time or didn't talk at all. There was no happy medium, but I grew up in an artist household where my mom told me the good artist paints the picture, the great artist knows when to put the paintbrush down. So, but on to the reporting and using of sources. There's a ton of different certifications. IABC offers certification, the American Marketing Association offers certification, PRSA offers certification, the ANA offers certification. Are we getting to the point to where maybe these certifications should maybe be used to be, okay, you are a credible journalist, you are a credible news source? What's your takes on certifications for communicators?
One thing good about certification is it requires continuing education. And there's no doubt that we should be lifelong learners. And sometimes, with those certifications, it forces that for those who aren't proactive. Beyond that, I think the best, experience is to be had actually on the job, not getting, letters after your name. So that's where I stand on that. I don't think there's anything wrong with certification. Certainly it comes from the right place and it helps educate. I don't know that it helps elevate communicators. I don't know that outside of, the PR space, for example, that the C-suite is looking at credentials for their top communicators. That would be something to aspire to if I were an accreditation organization, is to educate the C-suite about, those credentials of communicators. But it's not a bad thing. I can't say I'm neutral. I don't think it moves our profession forward, but I don't think it moves it backwards either.
In April, you guys announced that you acquired Communications Week. Sounds really exciting. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to why you wanted to do that? And it's kind of a two-part question. What can we expect this year?
We were really excited to now have Communications Week in our portfolio. It's a very flexible brand for us, very elastic. Since we cover all of communications, it gives us a global platform, to help all communicators all over the globe, tackle the most important issues facing them, in the year ahead. So our plan is Communications Week will be November 15th through the 19th. And this year it's going to be a hybrid model, which I think we've been using that word a lot out there, but we will have an in-person event on November 16th in New York City. It'll be more of a networking event because we need to start gathering at some point. And I think we're gonna take this slowly, but we're gonna bring people together for 3 hours of panel discussion and networking. But we're going to have our signature event, the Future of Communications conference that week. And then we have about a dozen industry partners that will be doing some programming during that week. And our theme for this year is transformation. And with the tagline, a new era for communicators. And we're looking at that word, many different definitions. Really, it's a transformation that we're all going through as citizens, humans, from the past year and a half. It's also the transformative role of the communicator. And it's also how technology is transforming the way that we communicate. So it's all three of those areas that we're looking at. And, we're going to have content around that. Ragan's going to have content around that, and our partners will as well. And we welcome everyone in the IABC community to, be a part of it in some way.
I love how you mentioned technology and transformation. I think those are incredibly important terms for people that are in any sort of communications field. And I like what you said earlier about continuing your education. Now, I personally agree with you 100% that it's more important to learn on your own and actually show results than to have the letters behind your name. I think that's incredibly important, whether it's reading, networking, learning from people through mentorship. I think that's incredibly crucial for professional development. But when we look at communications professional in a whole, I know that over the past 18 months, things have changed, working from home, maybe not having that water cooler talk, but in your time, just as the CEO of Ragan, what have you seen as the biggest gap for communications professionals today, and maybe the one area in which comms pros really need to focus on to help elevate their personal careers?
Business fluency. Communicators need to speak the language of business and understand even how to read a balance sheet, for example, understand the ecosystem in which their particular organization lives, whether it's an energy company or consumer packaged goods, like where, follow the money there. Who are the players? Because if you don't, and understanding the business goals of the organization as a whole, like really understanding them, not just knowing what the revenue goals are, but sort of all the different units and how they all work together, and collaborating with marketing and finance and digital, and IT, and so all of those things, to become, that's the language to learn of all the languages, is to become more fluent in the business. And then for sure communicators will be invited into the room and be like near the front of the table.
The quickness that you answered that question is just astounding. I think that you're very passionate about the, hey, let's learn how to speak business talk and not just how to market and communicate our companies. As mentioned, I'd been following Ragan for a long time. I remember back in the mid-early 2000s when it was a message board and a kind of a communications platform, and watching some of the transformations at Ragan and the acquisition. What are some of the futures, or what are things are you watching out in business communications? Where do you see us going in the next 5, 10, 15 years so we can continue to educate towards those kind of things?
I see that, and we're all seeing this, I think, the integration of marketing and communications. I mean, we've all been talking about that for a long time, integrated communications. I would add into that the blurring of lines between HR and communications. We launched a brand last fall, so not too long ago, around workplace wellness. And it's for us, we're covering it as the intersection of communications and HR, the employee wellness side of things, and that concerns communicators. And actually, wellness programs, corporations, any company really struggles with wellness programs and proving their worth and the ROI on that. And you know why? Because employees don't know about them. They're not being communicated. And why aren't they being communicated? Well, perhaps it's because there is not an alignment between HR and communication. So that's just one example, but I think that we're going in that direction of the mixed external communications, where it's like marketing, HR, PR, internal comms. I would even throw in some like IT and digital. We certainly need to get to know our IT colleagues a little better, because almost everything we're doing, at least at the desk, is driven by technology.
I'm going to steal your term external, by the way.
Not my term, but we do use that. I'm going to who the first person who said that was, but we've been using that term at Ragan, and people like that.
Yeah, I think it's so important as communicators that you have to be well-rounded, right? Something that worked 5 years ago doesn't work now. You've got to be forward-thinking. You've got to keep on sharpening your skills. If you're a PR person, learn about marketing, learn about analytics, learn about internal communications. These are all things that are going to help you as you advance in your career. But Diane, I really appreciate you for taking the time and joining us on the Business Communicators podcast. And I know you're active on social media, sharing a lot of the content from Ragan. But if our listeners want to learn more about you or learn more about Ragan, what are the best ways for them to, follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I can be reached by email at dianes@ragan.com. I'm on Twitter, Diane Schwartz, on Instagram, Diane K. Schwartz. So on LinkedIn, so I'd love to connect.
We'll definitely drop all of Diane's links in the show notes below. So just scroll down if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify right now and click on those and definitely connect with Diane. But thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators this week, Diane. It's been great hearing your perspective, and we wish you all the best of luck at Ragan, not only for the rest of this year, but in many years to come.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Thanks to Diane Schwartz for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast. I thought it was a really fascinating conversation with her. And, for context for our listeners, we had presented her some questions and topics that we might discuss. And I don't think we really covered half of them. I think a lot of the conversation was just spur of the moment, follow-up questions. And definitely want to thank her for offering insights. And to me, I thought it was great how quick she was with some of the responses, like Thomas in particular, when you asked her, like, what is the biggest gap for communications professionals like today? Or how do you see how can you develop it? And she talked about business fluency. I thought that was such a great answer. And I thought she was a wonderful guest.
Without blinking, I loved her answer, how quickly she said, what is the gap? Business communication or business acumen. You need to study up on that. And I was like, wow, you hesitated all of 10 seconds to get there. And I also liked just her authenticity. We've said that about a couple of our guests, but just how she's very approachable, very personable, very knowledgeable. And she even mentioned her journalism background. So I thought that was interesting.
I agree with regards to what she's saying about business acumen. Given that we all work with a lot of different businesses, but we don't take the time to understand the bigger picture of the businesses, the context, the financials behind it, what makes them really, succeed from that level is so important. And I take that to heart.
Great takeaway. And I think if you want to advance in your career, you have to know about the business that you work in and the industry that you work in. You have to be a subject matter expert on that, in addition to the communication skills that you offer and bring to the company. So great advice from Diana. We hope that you enjoyed that conversation with her. And of course, you can follow her and Ragan Communications. Just check her out on Twitter or email her. Just scroll down below if you're listening on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this, and click on the show notes, and her contact information will be there. So special thanks to Diane for joining us on the Business Communicators podcast. But guys, this is it's been great on season 3, and I've really enjoyed working with you all. I'm looking forward to season 4. But before we wrap things up on season 3, let's just talk a little highlights of the year. What has been going on? What are some of your favorite conversations that we've had, favorite moments, and any news stories that stick out to you? And for me in particular, this is one that Thomas shared, and I also saw this earlier this week. The Euros are going on right now. It's probably the second largest football or soccer, depending on where you live, tournament in the world outside of the World Cup. And it was supposed to take place in 2020, but because of COVID-19, it was pushed back to 2021. So from a branding perspective, it's still the 2020 Euros, just like the Olympics this year is still going to be called the 2020 Tokyo Games. I don't get that from a comms perspective, but I understand not reprinting and rebranding everything. So I understand that. But Cristiano Ronaldo, who is arguably the biggest star in the game, him or Messi, one of the most recognizable faces and recognizable athletes in the world, he made a little dent in the pocketbooks of investors for Coca Cola this past week. So if you're not familiar, we'll go ahead and share the video right now on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. But Ronaldo, when he's in his press conference, takes the Coca Cola bottles, puts them off to the side, out of focus, out of screen, and the market share for Coca Cola fell by $4 billion. Now, we talk about influencers having influence when they plug products or don't plug products. Cristiano Ronaldo, although he's an athlete, he's probably the world's most important influencer or brand ambassador because he has 300 million followers on Instagram. That's just insane. He's the world's most followed person on that platform. So, Thomas, Hattie, what's your reaction with this $4 billion snub of Coca Cola?
It happens.
I think it's really, really interesting because $4 billion is a really big number. And first off, I'm like, are they exaggerating? Are they doing this for splash headlines? But also knowing some of the back end that Coca-Cola is very data driven and they measure everything. And so whether you believe 4 billion or is it a little bit of exaggeration, it's irrelevant. It's a huge, huge number of just that one little hit from there. But I also think Coca-Cola could have been a little better prepared because they have water brands in their portfolio. Dasani and some other ones. And yes, well, Dasani is a U.S. company, but but have a Coca Cola product water bottle next to the Coca Cola bottles when you know that you're dealing with elite athletes who treat
Well, first of all, you got to know your athletes. There are some athletes that don't drink water; they drink Gatorade or whatever. But it was, in my sense, as I read the article, that they didn't really know who he was and what his style was, or they didn't have a real relationship with him, or they didn't talk to the person who did have a relationship with him. But I believe that Coca-Cola also said that, that athlete can do what he wants to do. If he wants to push it out, that he can do that. So they didn't take it personal, or if they did take it personal, they handled it very well. And he's not the only athlete that's ever done that.
No, not at all. And in fact, since that point in time, Pogba has done it at the Euro 2020s, 2021s, following suit with it. And I think Coca-Cola's response was perfect. I just think, that prior understanding of, hey, this athlete drinks Gatorade. Let's make sure that there's a Gatorade product there. Or, hey, this athlete drinks water. Let's make sure that there's a Coca-Cola branded water bottle or, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's where they fell short. I agree.
Well, we saw this as well in the Floyd Mayweather-Logan Paul fight afterwards. I mean, Floyd Mayweather, marketing genius, he knows the power of his personal brand, did the same thing, put the water bottles off. So I'm kind of curious from a brand perspective, like, is there any upside to having your water bottle or your product on the actual table where people are doing the press conferences, or is it maybe just better to have, a logo on the back where, they can't tear down that logo or move that logo? I think that's probably the best thing. But Thomas, to your point, I do think Coca-Cola had, a pretty good statement, saying players are offered these products, but it's not like a Coca-Cola rep was there like giving them these products. I mean, Ronaldo, if you follow him on social media, he's very, very open about his like fitness, like his health, like eating clean, that kind of thing. So I mean, this is definitely not Coca-Cola's fault, but it's wild to see their share price go from 56.17 to 55.22. If you look even further right now, Coke is trading at $54.30 at the time that we're recording this episode. So it's fallen more than $5 billion in market capital since the Euros have started, which is just an incredible figure.
But if you really look at all of this, remember how movies were really smart about having placement in movies of various brands. And because movies are not as prevalent as they were. I mean, they still are, but I think they were smart in putting, how they posted their products. But going back to this gentleman, and for me, again, it goes back to relationship. They don't know who he was.
Oh, they knew who he was. He's the most popular. Yes. He's the most popular.
Listen to what
athlete in the world.
Listen to what I'm saying. They did not know who he was, or they would have put a product there that reflected what he drank if it was a brand product there.
I get that, but again, this is an Coca-Cola. It's not like they have a brand rep at... Brand reps don't have that kind of access, right? To the players in a post-game press conference. They could potentially like be in the facility, but they're not, this is on the staff of the Euros putting these products out there, and the staff is told, okay, just make sure these Coca-Cola bottles are out there. And so this is not on Coca-Cola and knowing. This is just, it happens in sports. We see this happen all the time. It's not the first time it's happened. It's the first time it's happened with a high-profile athlete of this magnitude.
And I think again, Coca-Cola pays a lot of money to sponsor, to make sure their products are there, or to make sure their logo's there, all the other fun stuff. And when I said Pogba, I actually was pulling up a quick thing, because he also pulls out another drink. He pulls out a Heineken free, so non-alcoholic Heineken. Heineken's a big sponsor of the Euros as well. And he pulled out the Heineken alcohol free because he's Muslim. And so right there, I think they're learning that, hey, I don't drink Coca-Cola, I drink water. Here's my water bottle, but I also drink Heineken free. Yeah. So the organization's learning as it goes. And like I said, it's I just thought it was real interesting. And yes, I think the world knows who Ronaldo is.
100%. But I do think it's interesting, we'll see this during the Tokyo Games this summer as well. Athletes that maybe their country is sponsored by Nike, but as a runner, they're sponsored by Adidas or so on and so forth. I mean, we see this all the time with athletes covering up different logos, but it's been fascinating just to watch this unfold. But Thomas, Hattie, what are some favorite segments or topics or interviews that we've done for you guys in season 3?
Well, for me, I had 2. The discussion about deep fakes was really interesting for me.
Yeah.
And that they're out there. It was a really good learning experience for me about what they were and how they can be, weaponized or used in the wrong way. I enjoyed that. And my very favorite episode, of course, is with Jody and Buray.
It was a really good one. That was one of our most popular episodes for season 3. And Hattie, you're going to be on her podcast this fall, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. And can't wait to share that episode once it's out.
Yeah, we'll be recording that actually next week to talk about, it's about Black cancer. It's about African Americans who have cancer, the type of support you don't get, what your experience is. So that's going to be a really good conversation with Jody Ann. And it will be out, like you say, in the fall, October, which is actually coincides with Breast Cancer Month.
Definitely be sure to share that as well. But man, I just think back to some of the other guests that we've had. I mean, Daniel Vaughn, that was a fascinating conversation. And then, having Emmanuel Sanders on, a NFL athlete. And, I think back to Brandon Leak. I mean, it was another amazing conversation that we had. And just to hear the type of things that he's doing in his career and blowing up, it's tons of fun. And then obviously the best part is, getting to chat with you guys each and every Friday when we record these episodes and then throughout the week as well. But Thomas, what are some of your highlights for season 3?
Chris Brogan, just the conversation we had both on camera, on time, and afterwards. And then the relationship that I've built with him afterwards, just we email each other randomly now. But to your point, I've enjoyed just the breadth of guests we've had, the breadth of topics we've had, and to show that it's not just single focus. Don't be so narrow-minded, but look outside and look at things that can unite us. And I just thought that was just phenomenal, just as across the board.
It's been great. I've enjoyed season 3, and we look forward to coming back in the fall for season 4. But in the meantime, if you want to, let us know what some of your favorite topics or guests were, let us know. Follow our work as well. Just search @Biz Communicator on all of the social media platforms. Of course, you can go to the website, thebusinesscommunicators.com, to learn more. And again, we're not going anywhere during this summer. We're still going to be posting on social media. We're still going to be having these conversations. They might be on different platforms. They might not be necessarily on iTunes, Spotify. Could be a Facebook Live conversation. Could be a LinkedIn Live conversation, Clubhouse. And the best way to know is to follow us on social media. So just search @BizCommunicator. But Thomas, Hattie, it's been so great working with you all through 28 episodes of season 3, and can't wait to see what the future holds for all of us. But if there's any parting message that you want to give our audience as we close out season 3, what is it?
Be genuine. Trust your guts and your instincts. As professionals, we use all of our senses to do the work that we do, and keep that in mind as you move forward.
I'm actually wearing the U.S. soccer jersey today, and I'm doing it intentional because last year, without sports and everything like being in their home, you missed out on a lot of cooler talk. You missed out on a lot of those binding moments. About a week ago, during a match play during Euro 2020, a player by the name of Eriksson in the 42nd minute between Denmark and Finland collapsed on the field, and thankfully at the time of this recording, he's doing better from the hospital. But just yesterday, there was a soccer match that in the 10th minute, they kicked the ball out of bounds and stopped the soccer match just to applaud. And in soccer, there's no stoppage. So take time to get to know your fellow person, your fellow neighbor, your fellow coworker, the person that you're sitting alone at the restaurant. Find something common with them and just be genuine, as Hattie just said. Because at the end of the day, the relationships matter. We talk about PR, and back in the day, it used to be called public relations, and before then it was called public relationships. So relationships matter in what we do as communicators.
Great advice, great words from both you, Hattie, and you, Thomas. And I really appreciate hearing your wisdom, both of yours, every week on this podcast. And I guess for me, the takeaway is just similar to Hattie. It's be kind, listen to people, have conversations that continue to grow, to learn. I think that is only going to help you in your not only career but in your personal life as well. So that would be my advice and takeaway. But I think that is a wrap on season 3, episode 28, the season finale of the Business Communicators podcast. And on behalf of my co-host for this season, Thomas Bain, Hattie Horn, we won't see you next week. We'll see you next season. Take care.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.